pushed residents to streets.
Taken to the streets this morning. It continues to drizzle in Kampala, Uganda. Good evening, everybody. Welcome along to Business Today. I'm Jerry Paul Sonko with Winnie Williams and Akauchi on sign language. But first, a look at our top stories.
In Business Today, Kenya bans on riots as depreciating shilling and high commodity prices push residents to streets. DSTV moves to raise insolvency awareness among judicial officers, bankruptcy ultimately targeted. Emerging startups exploit venture capital opportunities as players still decry regressive tax regime and awareness.
Members of Parliament in Uganda have urged the chairperson of the East African Community to initiate peace talks between the current president of Kenya and his rival Raila Odinga before the situation in Kenya affects the rest of the East African community as far as trade is concerned. Now, this follows after Kenyans have taken onto the streets to show their grievances. We have more in this report.
With Mombasa accounting for 90% of Uganda's imports, the landlocked country's economy would suffer in case of a repeat of the post-2008 election wars. A section of Ugandan MPs have expressed this anxiety when calling for talks between the two sides. The Azimio campus turned to the streets to protest the high cost of living and the allegations of election fraud last year. Hundreds of Kenyans are protesting and some leading opposition politicians have been detained. This situation has many business people afraid. According to Honorable Macho Geoffrey, a Busia Municipality Member of Parliament, there are reported restrictions on the movement of persons and products at the busiest borders between Kenya and Uganda, which is already having an impact on the business of many.
This is affecting us as people on the border because by the time I left yesterday, all the lodges and the hotels were full of Kenyans who have come for safety in Uganda. It has increased the cost of living on the border, and the too much deployment on the border has threatened the principle of the East African cooperation of free movement of people and goods. So we see there is a problem that needs intervention from the leaders of the East African region.
Honorable Macho adds, before the situation escalates into destroying merchandise from either country, the East African community should do its work of restoring peace in the Republic of Kenya.
Fear and scary for the trailers and the merchandise to move across the border. There is real serious fear, and we need that sitting down to negotiate to remove that fear so that there is free movement of goods across the borders for our people to work.
The legislators have also cautioned government to plan for such eventualities in future, since Uganda is a landlocked country that directly depends on the waters of its neighbors for trade. And every time the neighbors have had chaos, Uganda's economy would be affected drastically.
Receive over 2,000 trucks that cross into the country every day with cargo, and over 1,000 trucks go back. The numbers have been continuing to increase, grow, but with the COVID coming in, it's a bit reduced in the flow, but that is coming up. So it would be very unfortunate if the relationship that we have with our Kenyan neighbors degenerates into what will affect the growing business interests and support across on either side.
We don't know what will happen for the other days, but as we speak, we have not heard of reports of specific attacks targeting cargo as of now. So no one should disguise and hide under the uprising in Kenya to hike prices. But as well, we have been urging this government to also the regime here to prepare for such scenarios as a landlocked country. So it will be a mistake of this regime, not a mistake of people. However, the conduct of Uganda would predetermine the conduct of Kenyans. If Uganda is seen as an aggressor, of course Kenyans will turn against Ugandans, including cargo.
Legislators have also recommended the business community and government to look at the alternative trade routes in Tanzania in the interim, because Tanzania currently has the best highways for goods transportations. They have also expressed their dissatisfaction with Uganda's standard gauge railways management sluggish pace.
The good thing nowadays, you have an alternative, which is Tanzania, with a very good road network constructed by the current regime in Tanzania. So somehow we may not be as affected as we used to be, but with the trade, bilateral trade, definitely it's going to be affected. The goods coming in from Kenya may not move well. The movement of goods and services may not be very fluent.
Uganda, being a landlocked country, is directly affected with the events unfolding in the Republic of Kenya. This has brought fear with the business community in Uganda as well. Legislators have called upon governments of East Africa to find a solution as soon as possible before the situation gets out of hand. Samla Nifa, Smart 24 TV, Business Today.
Moving on, still with the same particular incident in Kenya, the capital Nairobi, together with other counties, have today been graced by bonfires and riots as the country responds to economic strife. The depreciating shilling, inflation and scarcity of maize flour have pushed aggrieved pro-opposition citizens onto the streets in order to call in for a redress. Samla Hanifa held interaction with Honorable Kwizera Edi to understand the looming deep crisis proposals for the East African community and how this will affect the country. Samla Hanifa, take this away.
When Kenya sneezes, Uganda coughs, and what is happening in Kenya directly affects us Ugandans, especially in the business community. With me is Honorable Kwizera Edi, and we are going to assess the situation in Kenya right now and how the situation is affecting Ugandans right now. Honorable, what is happening in Kenya is directly affecting the business community in Uganda. I hear there's restriction in movement right now as we speak. Free movement of goods and people is restricted at the border area. Honorable, the situation that is happening, what should we do as Ugandans to avert this, because it is escalating?
Thank you very much, because first of all, Uganda is a sovereign state and Kenya is a sovereign state. But we have an arrangement with them under Joint Permanent Commission. It means that we have a relationship between Uganda and Kenya. If there is any matter that is there, we can resolve it that way. But if it is beyond, then we can resolve it under East African Community, if there is another matter that is there, or under the Great Lakes Conference, or under COMESA. But the issue in Kenya now, which is coming out of their past elections of last year, where one party is not satisfied against the other, and now as a result of their conflict, that Uganda is going to be affected. It is because this is our export and import route to the ocean. So definitely we shall be affected because the fuel will be, the immigration will be curtailed, meaning the number of vehicles that will be coming, even the trade will be affected so much. So even all the imports and exports will be affected that have been passing through Kenya. So it will affect our economy, but also their economy also will be affected. So we pray that the conflict does not take a very long time.
Honorable, the East African community has not come out yet to give its position on what is happening. You as a member of parliament, Uganda, what do you think the East African community should do right now to avert the situation?
First of all, many Ugandans and myself are disappointed with what the East African community is doing in everything. Because the original objective of the East African community was to have an economic federation, economic relationship, trade. But when it became into politics, now many people in East Africa don't want to federate in a way of political federation. That's why that many of these countries are going slow. Secondly, we became too ambitious to bring in countries that would not have qualified to be members of East Africa. So they have affected the speed at which East Africa would be achieving its objectives. When you bring in a country like Burundi, which cannot pay for its subscription, you bring in a country like DRC, which is every time in conflict, you bring in a country like Southern Sudan, which is in conflict, all of those are affecting the performance of East African community. So East African community now, instead of looking at now what is happening between Kenya and Uganda because of the war, nobody has picked interest. You may even find that the war in Kenya now, they have left it, and the conflict in Kenya, they have left it for Kenyans. Yet it is going to affect the DRC, it is going to affect Sudan, it is going to affect Rwanda, and it is going to affect even Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya will be affected. Even Sudan will be affected because of what is happening in Kenya now. So what's happening in Kenya now is beyond the borders, is beyond a sovereign matter. We should pick interest as East Africa. But who is supposed to pick interest? The one who would pick interest is the East African community headquarters. But do they have capacity? Are they given capacity? Because the original idea was to have ministers based in Arusha to have executive powers. But now in Arusha, they don't have executive powers. So they wait until the presidents meet. So that's why that the functionality of East African community is still below what we expected.
Honorable, coming back to our government here, Uganda being a landlocked country, we depend on Kenya mainly we use their waters for our imports and exports. What should the government do right now to protect our traders because of what is happening?
But you see, the problem is now in Uganda is that there are issues which Uganda should put in place. When you are planning, you plan for in the event that there is a problem in Kenya or in your neighborhood. But in Uganda here now, that thinking is not there. In Uganda, there are people who think or who do things without thinking. Now, if you say how much fuel do we have in our reserve, you may find it is maybe zero. It means we have not been planning or thinking. They may plan, but without thinking. So it means that now, is there no alternative? Can we pass in Sudan? Can we pass in Tanzania? So this one should teach Uganda a lesson that we should not use only one route to the ocean. We should use other routes. At least we use Tanzania, we use maybe Sudan. We can even use Congo and go to through Congo, Republic of Congo, and we have a good transport system from DRC, and we go to the other ocean. We don't use only Indian Ocean, we can even use the Pacific Ocean. So this one means that a strategic country which is planning should have a multiple route channels. That's what it means. So we are now learning. But as to whether Uganda has capacity now to implement those ideas, it depends on the bilateral arrangements. Because Uganda can now have an arrangement with DRC, work on the roads up to the border, then we will also work there. Sudan is the same, Tanzania the same, without waiting to say we only have one hole, like maybe like a rat, the way the rat moves one hole. So we think that this is a very good lesson for those people in the government and those who are thinking for us.
Honorable, coming back to the traders, the local person, what advice could you give them right now? Because I'm sure some people are scared for their goods to be taken out of Kenya or to be taken into Kenya right now.
What I know is that under trade, the things they are insured, and I think and I hope that the Kenyans will not loot our goods, because if goods are lost in Kenya, when they are already in Kenya in the transit to Uganda, the Kenyan government will pay very heavily, because the things will have come from Japan, Dubai, and everywhere. They are in your own territory. You are supposed under international law to provide safe passage for those goods until they cross over to another border. So the traders here should not only worry that things will delay, but they will not lose, because they are insured, and the Kenyan government is supposed to protect them when they are in Kenya, because they have already paid taxes.
Thank you, Honorable. Now, Honorable, lastly, Honorable, getting back to you've advised the trade, the local person and the traders.
Yeah, the traders should not get so much worried. It is only delay, but to say that their goods will be destroyed as they transit into the country, I am very sure that the Minister of Foreign Affairs is going to get in touch with Kenya, and whichever vehicles are in transit cannot be vandalized. If they are vandalized within the territory of Kenya, then the Kenyan government will pay.
Honorable, lastly, what would you tell President Ruto now and his rival, Raila Odinga, right now, as far as whatever is happening in their country is concerned?
Well, if I had an opportunity to tell them, I would tell them that politics has a season. And although politics have a season, you must make sure that you manage the expectations. Don't get overexcited. Elections took place. They went even to court. After going to court, they lost. The president took oath. He put cabinet. So they should accept what came out and wait for another time. And secondly, in case they want to cause chaos, chaos does not affect only those in power. It also affects those ones who are not in power, even for a long time. So they should know that chaos cannot affect only Ruto and those in the government, but even those ones who are not in government. So I would think that they should now be sober up and know that this is a season of 5 years. They should prepare to win next elections.
Yeah. Honorable, going back to the roots, you're saying we should have an alternative now. Looking at Tanzania, Tanzania has the best roads right now as we speak. But isn't Tanzania so far away from Uganda? Won't it cost our traders now alternating from Kenya to Tanzania, which is very far away?
But which is better, for safety or cost? Because what's important is for the goods to come and they arrive here when they are safe, than being stolen or vandalized in Kenya. So the route is determined by the safety of the merchandise or the goods to arrive. But I know that in Kenya it will take a very short time. Yeah. Yeah,
Honorable, talking about the standard gauge railway. Right now, I understand the standard gauge railway, Uganda is at 0%, and other East African countries like Kenya and Tanzania have moved at some percentage. Don't you think if the standard gauge railway was in place and operating here, it would have saved the situation in future if such things happened?
Yeah, the standard gauge railway from Mombasa into Uganda was disrupted by the Kenyans not wanting to make a portion of their land, their part, entering into Uganda. So there is no way Uganda now can make a standard gauge railway from within its borders when it cannot have an interconnectivity of the same gauge, standard gauge. It would be a waste of time. But what I'm sure about is Uganda is now making the meter gauge so that it is more efficient. Until now we have these problems, maybe now Uganda government will have it as a priority to make sure that they now have a more detailed dialogue with Kenyans because there are some misunderstanding which came in. That conflict should be resolved such that now Kenya can access funds, international funds, and they make that standard gauge from Kisumu up to Maraba. Then Uganda also from Maraba to the inside the country. That should be taken as a priority for both two presidents. But to imagine that it is not necessary, I think the president should take it as a priority, and the president in Kenya should take it as a priority that Uganda should be linked with Kenya on a standard gauge. Not to say that these people have a standard gauge railway, these ones have a meter standard. They cannot work. And second, of course, the other alternative of Tanzania. Tanzania is already making a standard gauge going to Rwanda, and then Rwanda is going to have a meter a standard gauge before we get it. We can also use the Tanzania now in case the distance and cost are allowable. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was Honorable Kwizera Eddie giving us a brief insight of what is happening in Kenya and what governments of East Africa should do to prevent further escalation of the situation in Kenya. That is from us here in Parliament. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Samla Hanifa, for that. Now, government is throwing its weight behind venture capital investment as a means of spurring the economic growth and job creation. With the new venture capital fund, startups and SMEs will have access to the capital they need to grow and thrive, while creating jobs and contributing greatly to the economy. We have more in this report.
According to the Uganda Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, capital activity has covered a few areas such as technology, agriculture, and health, which are seen as high growth areas. These have proposed significant potential for opportunities, profit and impact driven by innovation to address challenges such as financial inclusion, food security, and swift services, despite affiliate setbacks.
Uganda is raising some venture capital. I think last year we raised about, according to some estimates, the startups raised around $20 million US, and that is what is reported. Some people, this is private transactions. Some people don't report these transactions. So, the idea is, as an innovator, always have a pitch deck. Always focus on the soft skills to get this financing. The product offering should be, of course, good, but when you're pitching, you need communication skills. Actually, you need more soft skills to get this money than hard skills.
So if you think about any information that you collect in a central place, whether it's payment data or it's ID data or it's money, because money is information, that information can be centralized, it can be protected, and it can be utilized. Now, obviously, on the money-making side of things, you have two main avenues, or three main avenues. The first is education. Learn about it, teach others how to to go into the space. You will find that there's donor funding there for those who want to do that.
Industry players have expressed further vulnerability issues in the investment industry that has suggested potential to offer a significant role in innovation, economic growth, and job creation. But much to that is the fact that feasible investments should be prioritized.
I would want to know how can I convert the traditional apps into decentralized apps. That's where blockchain comes in. You've been building these apps for the last 5 years, but then now blockchain has come in. How can I leverage and plug it into what I'm already doing, Yeah, so I'm very much interested in decentralized apps. They are called dApps. You build this app, but then you want to ensure privacy, you want to build trust. So you plug in some good blockchain technologies, and all of a sudden you benefit from blockchain, you will leverage it.
Uganda's position as a key investment destination for private capital has been crucial in setting pace for the investment model as an alternative source for funding under direction of the Capital Markets Authority. This hasn't, however, materialized without concerns such as literacy and the tax regime.
As it stands, venture capital has a lot of tax implications to it. That is why people don't want to domesticate 100% here. They rather go, have it in Mauritius, have companies there, then channel it here, something of the sort. So the idea is, if at all, we can have seed enterprise investment schemes in this startup bill, and do less of the bureaucratic tendencies, then maybe we can attract more capital and our funders will get the adequate financing. The issue is with the startup bills that doesn't look into these areas, how to structure private equity funds and venture capital funds. We need to look into that. They cannot be companies.
With developments in technology, various startups have found essence to exploit innovations such as Web3, distributed ledger technology, thus expressing willingness to take risks. A largely inclusive investment climate is, however, urged for growth of alternative funding options such as private equity, venture capital, and crowdfunding. Mathani Msima, Smart 24 TV, Business Today.
All right, now Business Today does take a break. We return with more stories and business reports. Stick around.